I want all of you to recall those lessons on Australia. I actually discussed so many things on Australian people in general. Okay, how people reached there. So some introduction was given to you.
Yeah.
How explorers came there. Some kind of introduction was given to you. So that you may go straight into the Australian art, the people of Australia, their culture and art. So she will be presenting that. So welcome, Mudra. Over to you. You may please. Yeah, we are waiting for you to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you said, Anthony, you took over the whole migration lecture before. So this is more of a continuation here. I have not mentioned a lot of migration and the geography and everything that we have already done. So that's why my concentration for this presentation is strictly related to the people of Australia and the indigenous art forms and all the little things that are associated with the indigenous people of Australia. So this is what the presentation is going to be about. Just a minute. Okay. This is a little introduction of okay, first of all, the indigenous people of Australia, they are called the Aboriginal Australians or the Aborigines or the Torres Strait Islanders. These are the very common names that the people of Australia are called with. And there are approximately 400 to 500 Aboriginal tribes all over Australia, and they're spread all over. And but the issue is that it's only 3% of the population right now, and there's only 75 languages that are remaining. And one very interesting thing about the Aboriginal Australians is that they are considered to be one of the earliest people who migrated from Africa to the Australia. So they have even conducted a lot of DNA tests, which goes back to 75,000 years ago. And so it's considered like the Aboriginals are considered to be the oldest and the earliest track that we have, the confirmation that we have. So yes, this is the Australian Aboriginal flag. It's been there since 1971, and the map here shows all the communities that are spreaded everywhere. The bigger dots are the one which has the most density. So this is a density population map. It'll just give you an idea that they are spreaded all across the continent, and mostly they are in the north, but they are still everywhere. I mean, there are a lot of different tribes that we can see all over Australia. And mostly I have given like a few examples here, like the Wiradjuri tribe is in the New South Wales, the Noongar is in Western Australia, and I'm going to be mentioning a few more tribes ahead, so we'll get a better idea about it. Now the first art form that we'll be discussing is the prehistoric cave paintings, because when I was looking across the Australian Aboriginals, it turns out that even their cave paintings have been very different from the rest of the world. I mean, we can see that they are not only cave painting, but we can see a lot of evidences of petroglyphs, which are the rock engravings everywhere. And these sites are still very intact in Australia, and a lot of information was gathered of the Aboriginals from the cave paintings. So yeah, the first evidence of Australian Aborigines art dates back at least 30,000 years ago. So yes, these cave paintings are approximately 30,000 years ago. And as I said, there are two forms in which the cave paintings are available. One is the petroglyphs, and one are the pictographs. And the main site for these cave paintings is on the Kakadu National Park. I mean, it has got like at least 5,000 sites there, which are still they're trying to preserve it. And yeah, so I've just mentioned a few images here just to get a clear idea of it. Now, yeah, as you can see, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. So here we can see it is a very good combination of pictograms and petroglyphs. So this is a rock engraving and this is the rock painting. So it is a combination of both of them. Now this is very interesting to see because it's not this technique is not used in all the cave paintings that we see around the world. So there is petroglyphs also and there is pictographs also. It's a combination of both of them. Again, a few handprints. This is the Valiminga cave. It is a very, very famous cave and it's very beautiful, the Valiminga cave. So yeah, the petroglyphs, they are created by removing rock through pecking, hammering or abrading in order to leave a negative impression. So yeah, this is a kind of, not exactly a print making, but they're trying to create a mold out of that rock, and they are so precise with the engraving and they can cut through that rock using a lot of tools. So petroglyphs are seen all over these cave paintings. The pictograms are obviously the same, like they're applied using pigments on the rock. And the paintings that we see, obviously all of them are made using fingers or brushes made with chewed sticks or hair. Sometimes stencils are created by blowing the color from the mouth over an outline. So this can also be seen. So if there is a handprint, they can put a hand as a stencil and they can blow the color around it. And the evidence of a stencil drawing is also being seen. Yeah, this is the Valiminga waterhole. This, as I said, it's a very beautiful site for the cave paintings. This is the Valiminga waterhole. This is in South Australia. This is towards the south. This is the Kakadu National Park that I was talking about. This is one of the artworks there. And as I have mentioned in the caption, it is showing a creation ancestor being worshipped by men and women wearing ceremonial headdresses. So here we can see these men and women wearing these headdresses. If you can follow my cursor, these are the headdresses, these are the men and women, and these are the considered to be the ancestors, the creation. And as we will move forward, we will understand that Australians have their own ideology and their own philosophy of how the world was created, and they call it the dreaming. The creation for the Aboriginals is called the dreaming, and I will talk about it in a detail later on. But this is just, we need to understand this as a reference that they worship the creators, and the creators that the Australians believe, they worship them equal to the god. I mean, they are not exactly gods, but they are considered to be heroic power. They considered to have heroic powers and supernatural powers, and they are considered to be creating these Aboriginals. So we'll be looking at that ahead. This is one of the petroglyphs. This is Tasmania, northern Tasmania, and one of the petroglyphs that can be seen here. It's rock engraving. Okay, now there are two types of petroglyphs that the experts have observed. The one is very common geometric forms like simple circles and dots and arcs and those. And they have also found figurative forms. They have found petroglyphs of human beings and animals very sharply engraved inside the rock. And on the side, I have given an example of the Aboriginal symbols that are there. And as we can see, the boomerang and everything, we can even see a boomerang in one of the paintings. They have mentioned emu. Now, emu is considered to be a very important bird for the Aboriginals. They even use it for their skin. So emu is there. Then we have the depiction of women, man, and a normal person. So like a woman has just one hand and men have two hands. So that is the Aboriginal symbols that are observed in the paintings. I have listed down a few heritage sites here. They are the most, like, they have the most evident artworks for cave paintings that are there. And out of them, the Kakadu National Park has got the most number of sites. Here, the X-ray pigment art of Kakadu, for example, shows the internal organs of humans and animals. So they have even found like the pigmentation on these cave paintings is using blood, or maybe even as a sacrificial ritual or anything like that, and they have found actual biological evidences of DNA on these pigments. So that's also interesting. Now we come to the actual aborigines of Australia. Uh, Now these are just a few tribes that I have mentioned here. The aborigines, the first one is the Anangu. They are in South Australia. Then we have Guri. It's also called Kuri. I mean, it's Kuri and Kuri. They are very similar in pronunciation, but they are two different tribes. So some of them are in New South Wales. The Kuri are in New South Wales and Victoria. Then we have the Muri, the Nunga, the Nungar, the Palawa, and the Tiri. These are just a few examples of tribes, and there are many of them. There are so many tribes, at least 400 to 500. Now I am mentioning just a few rituals and a few art forms that these tribes follow. So the first is the Anangu tribe, and the pronunciation is very like it's I tried to do it, but it's Pigeon Jashra. It's Pigeon Jashra. It's very complicated, but yeah, they are also called that. And for the Anangu tribe, the women are very important. The women in the Anangu tribe are given a lot of importance. There is this one ceremony that is done by the Anangu women, which is the Inma, and it involves a lot of dancing and songs, and they put a lot of stories on their body. So here we can see images of women that are dancing. The Anangu tribes, they tend to wear a lot of black and a lot of dark colors, so that's how we can identify them. And the body is being painted and they are dancing and these rituals, so they are very women oriented, the Anangu tribe. So this is just one of the ritual for Inma. This is the Kuri tribe. Now the Kuri tribe has got their own set of artworks. The first is the shell craft. So what they do is obviously, yeah, so they are located on coastal areas, the Kuri tribe. So they have a lot of access to shells. So they arrange these shells together and they create a lot of artworks, which is the shell craft. And for Kuri tribe, I had to mention the Kuri women. The Kuri women, they sell shell craft baskets and decorative shoes, and this practice is still present in Sydney. I mean, a lot of Kuri women are there in Sydney who sell the shell artworks. Then the second artwork that they have is the possum skin cloaks. So this is the example of a possum skin cloak. So what happens is when a newborn baby is there, they will put the possum cloak over it, and as the baby grows older, every achievement that the baby has, it is mentioned on the cloak. So it is basically, as they've mentioned, it is to represent a kind of Kuri autobiography. So this entire cloak will represent all the achievements that the baby has in his life. So at the end of his life, this entire this entire cloak is used as an autobiography of that individual person, which is very interesting. I mean, they have the possum skin cloaks, and it has a lot of markings of the clan, the family. They are very closely knit with the clan, so they have their own symbols. This is the Kuri tribe. Yeah, then we have the Korobori. The Korobori is a cultural ceremony, and it is also called Yanda and Jalara, and in the Kimberley it's called Jumba. So every tribe has their own name for all these rituals. I mean, every tribe has their own language, every tribe has their own vocabulary regarding these rituals. So Korobori is the most common name. It is again a simple ritual of just dancing, and it involves a lot of costume and music, and so it's just one example of the ceremony. This is the Korobori. Then they have a lot of smoking ceremonies. So here what they do is they believe in burning native plants, and mostly they smoke emu bush. So they burn the emu bush and they smoke it, and like a lot of experts have also tried to find out the medicinal purpose of it, and they have actually seen that these smoking habits are proving good to heal a person. So smoking ceremonies are also being held, and this is just one of them. So the idea behind these smoking ceremonies is to acknowledge ancestors, ward off evil spirits, and heal and cleanse the place and the participants. So that is the reason for these smoking ceremonies. Then yeah, the body art, it is very, very evident, as I mean, until now also we have seen all the pictures. The body art is very common in the aboriginals, and the body art depends on the clan. Okay, so it depends on which family you are belonging to, which ancestors do you have, which spirits do you believe in. And every ceremony and every clan has their own symbols, and those symbols are painted on the body. And this is just one example of that. I mean, the yellow color that we see. So as the Anunga tribe that we remember, they use a lot of black clothes, so their paint is mostly white. Then here we have just one of the indigenous kids which have yellow on the paint. So body art is also extremely common in all the tribes of Aboriginal Australia. uh, the ornamentation reflects a person's family, ancestors, social grouping, and territory, and is a deeply spiritual practice, particularly around marriage ceremonies. Yes, any kind of ceremonies, like not only marriage, any kind of ceremonies. Even in the Korobori that we saw, body paint was applied. It's very ritual and traditional for them. Yeah, then we have the didgeridoo. The didgeridoo is a musical instrument. It's a very long bamboo like wooden tube. It looks like a bamboo, but it's wooden. So they have a very long wooden tube, and it's a very, very famous aboriginal musical instrument. And yeah, I'll just read it. The didgeridoo, a long wooden tube from Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, is the most famous Aboriginal musical instrument. But it's not only the one. The flat wooden bull roarer, percussive clapping sticks, and the humble gum leaf are also used in Aboriginal Australian ceremonies. So, yeah, the didgeridoo is one of the instruments. I mean, it's not the only instrument. They use a lot of other small instruments made out of wood. So, this is just one example of didgeridoo. Then, yeah, the funerary practices. Now, as I said, the Aboriginals believe a lot in the creation. They believe in the dreaming. Okay, so the ritual takes place. The funeral rituals, they take place in two stages. Okay, so when a person dies, the body is taken up to a high platform. It is kept there for several months. The body is kept there for several months, and after the body has disintegrated, they, like, now then there are like two categories. Either they will keep the bones as a remembrance for the ancestors, or they will shatter the bones around on their land. So these are the two things that happen. So they put them on a very high platform, and it's left to disintegrate for quite a few months, and then the bones are used. The bones are considered to be the remembrance of that ancestor. So yeah, who believe that the soul joins the eternal dreaming. I'll talk about the dreaming later on, but this is what they believe in, that after the person dies, they go back to our ancestors. They go and meet our ancestors. So that's why they do this ritual of funerary practice. Now we come to Aboriginal dot art. This is the most famous form of artwork by the Aboriginal Australians. Yeah, here, the dreaming. So the dreaming is basically the Aboriginal idea of creation of life. Creation of life. It includes everything. It includes human beings, it includes animals, it includes nature, everything. So they believe that the creation was taken place during the everyven. I've written it. Yeah, the concept of everyven. So it was the time when the lands were inhabited by ancestors with supernatural or heroic abilities. And so the dreaming is considered to be a totemistic design owned by a tribal group or individual, and is considered to be an intellectual property. Now, the Aboriginals take the dreaming very seriously. I mean, so if I'll just try to make this easier. I mean, if you are one of the people in your clan, and you have your own ancestors. Now, if my ancestor has shared a dreaming with me, then I cannot share that dreaming with anybody else without the permission of my ancestors, or without the permission of the person whose dreaming it belongs to. It is like an intellectual property. The dreaming belongs to individual people, and it cannot be shared with everybody. It's not supposed to be shared with everybody. Every clan and every group has their own idea of the dreaming, has their own version of their ancestors being those creation, and it cannot be shared with everyone else. So now the question arises that if it is so sacred and if it is so secret for the aboriginals, then how did the dot art come into place? So this is just one example. This is Clifford Possum. He's one of the very famous Aboriginal dot art artists. So Clifford Possum. So I'll just give you an example. So Michelle Possum is Clifford Possum's daughter. Okay, and if Clifford Possum is drawing the lizard, so it is the parenti dreaming. This is his version of dreaming that he got from his ancestors. And Michelle Possum, she is drawing the women's dreaming. Now, the women's dreaming was handed over to her by her mother and not by Clifford. Okay, so that's why she can draw it. I mean, it was handed over to her by her maternal line, and that is the only reason that she's allowed to draw that. If she was not given that, then she cannot draw this dreaming. So if Clifford is making a dreaming, then Michelle is not even allowed to see it. So by tribal law, his daughters are not allowed to see male tribal ceremonies, let alone paint them. So they're not even allowed to see those dreamings. And Clifford and his daughters have not painted the same subjects. Clifford has never painted the Seven Sisters dreaming. So as I said, it's very gender related. It's very gender related. I mean, if my maternal side is passing a dreaming to me, then only I can draw it. I mean, if I have a brother and if my father decides to pass the dreaming to him, then only he can draw it. So it is very gender related, and it is very niche for you to attain a dreaming of your own. So this is just an idea of how the dreaming is passed on from one generation to another generation. And yeah, his daughters Gabriella Possum and Michelle Possum have painted the Seven Sisters dreaming, or the Pleiades, as they inherited the dreaming through the maternal line. Consequently, they have painted their grandmother's country, which is an expression of their inherited ownership of the land through knowledge of the dreamings. So yeah, this is just to give you an idea of how the dreaming works. It is passed on from one generation to generation depending on the gender. This is again an example of the dreaming. This has been drawn by Gabriella Possum, and this is the Seven Sisters, the Milky Way and the Seven Sisters dreaming. This dreaming was inherited by Gabriella from her mother, handed down to her from her paternal grandmother, and long rows given to Gabriella by her father. So as you see, it's a very long line of dreaming that is being shown here. This is their version of the Seven Sisters. So as you can see, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These are the Seven Sisters, considered to be the story of Milky Way and the Seven Sisters. So this is the Milky Way and this is the Seven Sisters. Again, this is Therese was handed down the earth images style to paint, and it is a macro view of the land of the small remote town of Catherine, the area where her Gurindji tribe once inhabited. So yeah, we can see a lot of aerial views of the land. So this is her version of the aerial view of the land in which the tribe is living. This is drawn by Therese. The use for ochre paints is marked in Arnhem Land and East Kimberley, and materials used for Aboriginal art was originally obtained from the local land. Ochre or iron clay pigments were used to produce colors such as white, yellow, red, and black from charcoal. Just to give you an idea about the color schemes. Okay, so now we come on, like we're continuing the dot art. So now that we have understood how the dot art works, I'll just try to explain of how the dot art was commercialized, of how the dot art was brought out to other people, for people who did not belong to the clans and for people who could not understand the dreaming. So there comes Geoffrey Barden. So Geoffrey Barden was this one person, and he was an art teacher at the local school in Papunya. So Papunya is a very important place for the Aboriginal people, because the Papunya is considered to be the spot where all the tribes gather. And so what happens is, one day, like, he sees, like, Barden is seeing the children draw some symbols, and he is trying to ask them to draw it on canvas, but they are not allowed. I mean, they were not allowed by their ancestors to draw the symbols on the canvas. So instead of making the symbols on the canvas, what they did was they started putting dots all over the symbols so that it cannot be identified by other people. So if I had a dreaming and if I had to put it on canvas, okay, so if I put dots around it, if I put hatchings and lines, and if I cover that dreaming with a lot of other elements, then you cannot identify the dreaming. So this was Barden's idea of trying to put the dreaming into canvases and make them permanent and then sell those paintings. So yeah. So later on, he also added acrylic mediums for the paintings, and these artworks show dots, cross hatching, maps of circles, spirals, lines, and dashes. Now, in this image, in the background, we can see the Papunya school. This is the school wall, and the mural is one of the first depiction of the dreaming that was painted. Now, yeah, here is the example: the honey ant dreaming. This is the wall, this is the school, and this is the wall on which the mural was made. Now, this is a very interesting story, because before the mural could be painted, all the tribes in Papunya, these are the tribes: the Pintupi, the Walpiri, the Arenete, and the Anma. The names are very difficult, but yeah, the Anma Tiare had to agree that the honey ant was an acceptable mural. So the tribes had to gather. They had to discuss amongst them if the people can be allowed to draw this dreaming. And afterwards, Barden finds out that one of the senior elders, Long Tom Onion, he is one of the elders, he had suggested the mural be painted. He was the one who was in favor of the mural being painted. And later, Barden realized that Long Tom Onion owned that dreaming. So the honey and dreaming is owned by Long Tom Onion. And he was the only one who could allow Barden to make this mural on the wall. So it was that strict. All the tribes had to gather, and Onion had the final say. Long Term Onion had the final say if Barden could make this mural or not. This is the honey ant dreaming. Okay, so now that we've understood about dot paintings, we have understood about the tribes. Now let's see how these artworks and the Aboriginal art is being used in today's times in the contemporary art world, and how they have started using other mediums also. So this is Albert Namatjira. Okay, it's Albert Namatjira, and he's one of the first Aboriginal artists to have painted in European style and also to use watercolors. So he's the one of the most famous Aboriginal watercolor artists of European style paintings, and his main drawings were entirely deserts. I have a few drawings, and his first exhibition was held in 1937 in Adelaide. Again, commercializing the Aboriginals. So this is one of his paintings, Catherine Creek. This is 1950. These are the Northern Ranges, again 1950. Now here we can see the style is extremely European. He's using watercolors. It has got nothing to do with the dreaming. It has got nothing to do with the tribes. This is just the pure form of art that Albert is trying to put out. Oh yeah, okay, that's it. That's it for Albert. Now, So during the mid 1980s, with more Aboriginal women artists appeared on the scene, a wide range of modern colors were chosen, and bright desert paintings started to arrive on the market. Now, before this, all the paintings that we saw, they mostly had ochre and red and black. But now, a lot of paintings are going to be using a lot of different colors. So purple comes into existence, pink comes into existence, and all these different colors that were never seen before in the Aboriginal art, they start to appear. Then the styles vary dramatically even within regions, and there is certainly no hard rule here, as can be seen in many of Papuna's artworks that don't necessarily follow this thinking. Okay, Aboriginal art is equally at home in both galleries and museums. The Australian Aboriginal is arguably the most successful and certainly the longest surviving culture in human history. So, unlike a lot of tribal art that we have seen, like even since first semester, we have been seeing a lot of tribal art, and we keep saying that, the tribal art is dying, the tribal art is dying, but Aboriginal art is one of the few artworks that are extremely thriving. I mean, the Aboriginal arts are available all over the museums. They are selling out for millions, and I mean, it's actually thriving a lot. And the survival of this art form is not at risk right now, because a lot of people are practicing it. They are coming up with new ways and new methods and new mediums to extend the art. So this is just one example, and so it is thriving. I mean, it's very interesting to know that it is not dying at all. It has been selling and commercializing and everything. So yeah, this is just one example. So much more than just dots, the patterns and symbols can mean different things to different people from different regions of the country. So again, a lot of dots can be seen, a lot of lines hatching, cross hatching, repetition. A lot of repetition is being seen. But again, the contemporary Aboriginal artworks, they are not supposed to be related to the dreaming. They are not supposed to be adhering to the concepts of the ancestors having to share the dreaming with them. So yeah, this is again another example of just pure hatching. This is the painting from Arnhem Land. This is the Wangina spirit being come from the Kimberley. Again, dots. We can see a lot of dots and a lot of images. Yeah, these are the references that I've used, and that's it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mudra. It was a very good presentation.
Yeah.
You also introduced so many new things to me also. And one thing I wanted to comment is you are showing a particular site where you found petroglyphs and paintings together. And what is your reflection over that?
Like what? Like,
That means, what do you think about the presence of petroglyphs and the paintings in the same site, on the same wall?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, because we have studied cave paintings from France. We have seen cave paintings everywhere else. So, I mean, me personally, I mean, I have seen, like, it's either paintings or it's engraving. A combination of both petroglyphs and pictographs is very rare to see. I mean, for me, I mean, it was a very rare occasion for me to see both the things together. So it shows that they knew how to compose a pictograph and a petroglyph together. I mean,
that's where I wanted to. That's where I wanted to intervene. Most of the time, as far as I understand, these are all a part of rituals.
Yes.
Okay. And you referred to that rightly. Afterwards, in your talk, you were telling that. So the thing is that they made the pictogram as a part of a ritual, and later maybe after years, they are making a painting over that as a part of the ritual. So it is not probably it is not a composition in that manner.
Yeah.
But it is probable that they overdraw since it is a part of a ritual, because they are Understand?
Yeah,
So,
I get it. Yeah,
and that
I
kind of
thought
things
of
are
that. Yeah,
found, in other parts of the world also. You may find when you look at a painting, the very painting, there will be painting something, over there will be another painting.
yeah,
So there may not be something that was painted as a single composition.
yeah.
It was a ritual that was performed on the rock in the form of painting, in the form of petroglyphs, engraving, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a kind of confusion, it was a single composition when you
Yeah,
were talking.
because like visually it looks like a
Yeah,
composition,
yeah,
and even if it
yeah.
was made during two different ages, it's still a good combination of a composition.
Yeah, true, true.
So
That is true. Visually,
yeah,
we may be feeling that, but
yeah,
historically, when we look at it, it may be, it may be having a difference of centuries between, in between.
it may be.
Both
Yeah,
of them.
I thought of that also, that it
Okay,
cannot be
okay,
from the same time.
okay. And
Yeah.
anybody else want to ask some questions or any comments to make, any doubts or anything?
Uh, I don't have a question per se, but it's just an observation that this is about dreaming thing. It must be really like at present, or maybe I don't know. It could be anytime. It's like considering the ownership of a dreaming thing. The and the Brandon George Brandon comes and makes a mural, and then suddenly some Tim says that it is his dreaming. Then there could be a considering the vast population. There'll be so many dreamings which may coincide. So there could be a problem of ownership, right?
Yeah.
Someone will be like, no, this is mine. No, that is mine. No. That
No,
I mean,
actually, see, that's the thing. I mean, that doesn't happen because they are not allowed to share the dreaming even to the person of the next tribe. They are not allowed to do that. So even if I have
There
a
is a
dreaming
sort of
and
copyright. There is a sort of copyright thing in the
yeah, it's
symbols
a
they are
copyright
using.
thing. I mean, I don't even have to tell someone else about it. So, and the thing is that they are not even allowed to do so. I mean, if I share a dreaming with some unknown person, then that particular person is supposed to be punished according to the tribe. So they are punished if the dreaming comes out. If they find out that the dreaming has come out without the permission of the ancestors, the person is supposedly punished very harshly. So doesn't there's no conflicts. I mean, that's the best part. You never know what your dreaming is, and the other tribe also has the same dreaming. It can happen. It can happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything more? So shall we conclude? Now it is 4:30. Anyway, we started a little late. Still, but
Sorry for that.
no, it is not your fault. We shall wind up. Or Pallab, do you be tomorrow? Who is doing it? Tomorrow, who is presenting?
I think Suilin.
Yes,
Swilan is presenting tomorrow. Okay,
yes.
so
3:30.
let us continue tomorrow. And if possible, Pallab, we had to postpone Pallab's presentation yesterday because of my issue. It was not my issue, my network issue. So we will be meeting again. Okay. And if possible, we will be doing one after another. After one presentation, we'll take a short break and we'll join again and we'll be completing that. And will there be anybody left after that? Fabiha is there, right? Okay, we'll
Yes.
do that Sunday or Monday. Okay.
Okay.
And after that, I want to compliment all your presentations because when you are looking at it, that means there are a lot of things that can be presented actually, but we need to cut it down in order to keep it to that timing. Okay. So I will also add certain things along with your presentation. Like in Australia, you find something like Jurinka. I don't know. Maybe you have come across when you are reading. There is sand art, bark painting. So there are certain things that we may be means I'll be complimenting all those things that you are missing. Okay, that you somehow missed. So thank you for your presentation. Let us meet again tomorrow. Bye bye. Okay.
Bye.
Okay.